Today's lesson is doubling down. Doppelgangers share more than just looks. Hi, everybody. My name is Roger.
And my name is Helen.
And today we're going to be talking about your double, or the person out there somewhere in the world that looks exactly like you, or you look exactly like that other person. And we do use the word doppelganger to refer to such a person, or just simply as your double.
Yes, that's exactly what doppelganger means. A doppelganger is someone who looks exactly like somebody else, so much so that they can be considered twins.
A lot of people believe that we do have doubles out there somewhere, or doppelgangers. And today we're talking about their genetic makeup. Maybe it's not just a coincidence. Maybe we are actually related to each other genetically, although we probably don't have the same parents, but we may have very similar genes. Let's find out what this is all about, everybody. Let's listen to the first part of our lesson, and we'll come right back to discuss it.
Doubling down. Doppelgangers share more than just looks. Believe it or not, it's likely that there is someone in the world who looks almost identical to you. So much so that you could be mistaken for twins, even though you are unrelated. Such lookalikes are called doppelgangers, and a new study suggests that they share more than just appearance. In fact, the similarities extend down to the level of the DNA.
大家好，第一部分我们可以看到单字 extend， 这个字是动词，指的是延伸、伸展或是延续。例如 The forest extends from the foot of the mountain all the way to the city limits. 这片森林从山脚下一路延伸到城市边界。或者 Casper was having a wonderful time in Thailand, so he decided to extend his stay. Casper 在泰国玩得很开心，所以他决定延长停留的时间。另外补充这个字的名词 extension, E-X-T-E-N-S-I-O-N, extension. 它的意思是延伸、扩张或是电话分机。像是 You'll need to apply for a visa extension if you want to stay in that country. 如果你想留在该国，你需要申请签证延期。或是 You can reach Peter if you call 555-6745 extension 214. 如果你拨打555-6745分机214，就可以联系到 Peter。
So before diving into today's lesson, let's look at today's title. It's Doubling Down. Doppelgangers share more than just looks. So we already talked about what doppelganger means, but let's look at the phrase doubling down. So a pun is being made here. There are two senses of the phrase being used. So to double down means to increase your efforts or your focus in doing something. A person can double down on saving money. A student can double down on their studies, which means to put an extra effort in doing those things. But here, doubling down is referring to the fact that there may be somebody out there who looks exactly like you. That person could be your double. So here we're talking about doppelgangers, and in this sense, we are doubling down. We are putting our effort into this topic.
Yep, and again, they aren't identical twins, but again, there may be some genetic similarities between people who look almost alike. Now, here in the first paragraph, it says, believe it or not, it's likely that there is someone in the world who looks almost identical to you, so much so that you could be mistaken for twins, even though you are unrelated. So you might not believe it. You might think that you're unique and that nobody else could ever look like you. But I guess statistically speaking, there probably is someone in the world who looks almost identical to you. Not 100%, but maybe 90% or 95%. They look almost identical to you. And here the word identical means exactly the same. So sometimes, of course, a woman will give birth to identical twins, which means they're born at the same time. They're from the same egg, but the egg splits off. Those eggs have the same genes in them, so the babies that come out are identical. They look exactly the same.
Yes, you can also use the word identical to talk about things. Two suitcases can be identical, and if you have two identical suitcases, then you might make a mistake and pick up the wrong one at the airport. So you want to make sure that your suitcase doesn't look the same as anybody else's.
Exactly. So there might be someone out there who looks almost identical to you, so much so, or to such a degree, that you might be mistaken for twins. Someone might see you in, say, Sweden, and they'll see someone else in Canada, and they'll think, hey, they must be twins. Even though they live in different countries, they've got to be identical twins because they look exactly alike. So you might be mistaken for twins even though you are not related. So indeed, we do have identical twins in the world, but they are related. Of course, they have the same genetic structure. They come from the same mother. But it is possible for people to look almost exactly alike, even though they are not related at all.
Right, and here the phrasal verb to mistake for means that you take one thing for another. So I could say, I mistook you for my friend Sally because you look so much like her. Or you can mistake this pen for somebody else's because the two pens look alike. So you mistake one thing for another when those two things are lookalikes. Such lookalikes, continuing on here in the next sentence, are called doppelgangers, and a new study suggests that they share more than just appearance.
In fact, the similarities extend down to the level of the DNA. So here we have extend, which means to go farther out from a particular location. If you want to travel to a certain country and you've got a visa for only 2 weeks and you want to stay longer, well, you might want to extend your visa to make it longer. And in this particular case, the similarities of a person might not just be a coincidence. They will actually go down to their DNA. Their DNA or their genetic structure will actually look pretty similar as well.
Right, so there might be somebody out there who shares your DNA or certain aspects of it, and that's what makes that person your doppelganger, somebody who looks very, very much like you.
Indeed. Okay, so let's continue talking about this topic in the next paragraph. Let's listen first.
To determine whether lookalikes have genetic similarities, scientists contacted 32 pairs of doppelgangers, asking them to provide samples of their DNA. Using facial recognition software, the researchers then analyzed the faces of the lookalikes. When they compared the results to those for actual identical twins, they discovered that half of the doppelganger pairs had twin-like scores. The DNA of these 16 pairs was then studied to determine whether the similarities ran more than skin deep. The scientists found that 9 of the 16 pairs had such similar genetic characteristics that they could be considered virtual twins.
第二部分我们看到形容词 genetic， 它的意思是基因的或是遗传的。举例来说 Dr. Wu is one of the world's leading experts in human genetic diseases. 吴博士是全球顶尖的人类遗传疾病学专家之一。又或者说 The patient's condition was caused by a genetic disorder. 那名病人的病况是一种基因疾病引起的。另外，如果把这个字的字尾 tic 去掉，就会变成名词 gene， 意思是基因或是遗传因子。像是 Genes influence the color of our eyes and hair. 基因影响我们眼睛和头发的颜色。或是 Scientists found that humans have over 20,000 genes. 科学家发现人类有超过2万个基因。接着我们看到单字 recognition， 这个字是名词，指的是认识、辨识或是承认、认可。例如 After the artist died, he finally started to receive recognition for his work. 在那位艺术家过世后，他终于开始因为作品而受到认可。或是 The company's voice recognition technology is unmatched. 这间公司的语音辨识技术无可匹敌。另外补充这个字的动词 recognize, R-E-C-O-G-N-I-Z-E, recognize. 它的意思是认出、辨识或是承认。举例来说 Tim recognized one of his old classmates in the supermarket. Tim 在超级市场里认出一位他的老同学。我们也可以说Andrea is recognized around the world as an expert animal trainer. Andrea 在全球各地都获认可为专业驯兽师。再来我们看到名词 characteristic 指的是特色或是特征。例如 The characteristic sound of a trumpet echoed through the halls. 小号独特的声音在大厅里回荡。或者我们可以说 Beautiful bridges are one of Venice's most famous characteristics. 美丽的桥梁是威尼斯最著名的特色之一。
So now we're going to look at the science behind doppelgangers. To determine whether lookalikes have genetic similarities, scientists contacted 32 pairs of doppelgangers, asking them to provide samples of their DNA. So scientists wanted to know whether these doppelgangers had any similarities in their genes, any genetic similarities. So genetic here is a word that means relating to genes. And of course, your genes are the patterns or the chemicals within your cell that's responsible for passing down qualities between a parent and a child. So if a child has blonde hair or blue eyes, or if a child has certain genetic diseases, these things are usually passed down to the child from the parent.
Yep, genes and DNA, they're very closely related. And yes, indeed, we need to determine whether lookalikes have genetic similarities. In order to see that, scientists contacted 32 pairs of doppelgangers, asking them to provide samples of their DNA. Would you be willing to send us a sample of your DNA? Because we are conducting a scientific experiment. We want to see if there are similarities between your DNA or your genes with other people or another person who looks almost exactly like you.
Yes, and using facial recognition software, the researchers then analyzed the faces of the lookalikes. So these researchers used facial recognition software. That's software that is able to recognize faces. So recognition is the act of recognizing something or somebody. And you can also say that an actor didn't want to be recognized by his fans. So the actor wanted to escape recognition. Therefore, the actor wore dark glasses and a hat so nobody would recognize him.
Right, and we hear about this facial recognition software all the time. It might be used to identify people who work for certain companies, but in a more sinister way, it will probably be used by dictatorships as a way to keep track of people in their society, to stop troublemakers from organizing revolts or things like that, and nipping that trouble in the bud. But in this particular case, yes, we're talking about facial recognition software, a computer program that will recognize people based on their features in their face, and the researchers then analyzed the faces of the lookalikes. Okay, so they pretty much looked scientifically at the faces of these people, and when they compared the results to those for actual identical twins, they discovered that half of the doppelganger pairs had twin-like scores. So we're talking about identical twins here, ones that came from the same egg that later split apart, and they're comparing the results of those identical twins or their DNA structure with those doppelganger pairs to see if they're similar or not.
Right. So of these 32 pairs of doppelgangers, half of them, or 16 pairs, had twin-like scores, which means that they scored like as if they were identical twins. Now, the DNA of these 16 pairs of doppelgangers was then studied to determine whether the similarities ran more than skin deep. So, in other words, they wanted to find out whether the similarities meant more than the fact that they looked alike, whether there was something deeper that showed their similarities to one another.
And the scientists found that 9 of the 16 pairs had such similar genetic characteristics that they could be considered virtual twins. Not identical twins, but virtual twins. If they're virtual twins, well, they're twins in a sense, and they are on the surface, and yes, they do bear similarities with their genetic structure. It's probably just a coincidence. Of course, they're not directly related, but by some sort of coincidence, they just happen to have very similar DNA structure.
Right, and here the word characteristics in genetic characteristics refers to a particular feature or quality that's typical of someone or somebody. So you can talk about somebody's physical features or physical characteristics by saying the person is tall or short or medium-sized or has long hair or blue eyes or dark eyes. These are all physical characteristics.
Okay, let's move on now to the third and final part of our lesson. We will listen first.
Aside from confirming suspicions about the similarity of doppelgangers' DNA, the study's findings could have important medical applications. For example, they could potentially allow facial recognition software to be used to predict a patient's susceptibility to certain genetic diseases.
"最后第三部分，我们看到片语 aside from 加名词或动词 ing， 指的是除了点点点之外。举例来说 ，Aside from sports, Colin also likes movies。除了运动之外 ，Colin 也喜欢电影。又或者说 ，Apart from jogging every morning, Martin stays in shape by swimming 3 times a week。除了每日晨跑之外 ，Martin 一周还游泳3次来维持身材。
Aside from confirming suspicions about the similarity of doppelgangers' DNA, the study's findings could have important medical applications. So now we're going to look at what the results of this study can mean or what the results can do for the future. So aside from confirming suspicions about the similarities of doppelgangers' DNA, aside from here means besides confirming that doppelgangers might have some similar DNA, findings from the study could also have important medical applications.
Right, so 2 things are happening here. You could say aside from or in addition to. Aside from confirming suspicions about the similarity of doppelgangers' DNA. So yes, we have that one thing. They can confirm that their DNA is similar. So in addition to doing that, the findings of the study could also have important medical applications. So findings are the result of a survey or the result of some research. So, of course, people in universities, professors or whatever may conduct experiments, and then they'll have their results or their findings. So the results of this scientific research could have some uses in the medical field or in medical applications. Application can mean a couple of things here. It could mean things that can be done to achieve a certain result, medical applications such as surgeries or treatments or medicine development and stuff like that. An application, of course, as you know, could also be a computer program, oftentimes shortened to APP or app. I just downloaded a new application to my smartphone, or you could say I downloaded a new app.
Right, so what are some of these important medical applications? Well, for example, they could potentially allow facial recognition software to be used to predict a patient's susceptibility to certain genetic diseases. So as an example, these medical applications could be used to potentially allow facial recognition. Potentially here refers to the possibility that something could happen in the future. It's not sure yet, it hasn't happened yet, but it's potentially possible. So I could say that a particular food can be potentially harmful to animals. That food might be safe for us to eat. But if an animal, if a dog or a cat ate it, then it can be potentially harmful.
Right, so potentially you could go see a doctor and they could take a look at your facial features and compare them with somebody else, and then they could compare or they could predict your susceptibility to certain genetic diseases, and they could warn you ahead of time. And susceptibility here just refers to your ability to be influenced by something or to catch a certain disease. So you might be susceptible to a certain kind of cancer, for example. It might be easier for you to catch this type of cancer or to get this type of cancer than someone else would. So that's what susceptibility means here. And indeed, this technology could have applications in the future to help us not get sick. Isn't that interesting? Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. Let's listen now to Hanny.
各位同学大家好，我是 Hanny。 我们来看今天的文法重点。先看到标题里的 doubling down。 Double down 原本它是指说在纸牌游戏中加倍下注。那在玩纸牌游戏21点的时候呢，这个手中牌的点数还没有爆的人，他可以加倍下注，然后获得再拿一张牌的机会。那这在英文当中就称为 double down。 引申的意思就是有加倍投入啊，更加坚定，或者是变本加厉的去做某事。举例来说 Instead of apologizing, he doubled down and insisted that it was my fault. 他不但没有道歉，反而还变本加厉的坚持是我的错。好，那我们接着读到课文第一句，他说 Believe it or not, it's likely that there is someone in the world who looks almost identical to you, so much so that you could be mistaken for twins, even though you are unrelated. 好，那这边有3个重点。第一个重点是在于 believe it or not， 它表示信不信由你。那这个片语呢，是用来带出一项可能令人吃惊的事实。像我们可以说 believe it or not，I once ate an entire birthday cake by myself. 信不信由你，我曾经一个人吃掉一整个生日蛋糕哦。好，那第二个重点是在于 so much so 加上 that 子句，这是表达达到如此程度以至于怎么样怎么样。那这个句型是用来强调前面叙述的情况程度如此的高，以至于有某种结果。那在使用的时候呢，它跟主要子句通常就会用逗号隔开来，像是 Simon had a strong passion for acting, so much so that he became a professional actor. Simon 非常热爱演戏，以至于他成了一名职业演员。好，那第3个重点是 mistake， 它当动词有误认啊、认错、搞错的意思。当我们用 mistake A for B 就表示把 A 误认成 B， 那么被动用法就是 A be mistaken for B。 好，那我们看一个例句哦。Teresa and her sister are often mistaken for twins， 就是说 Teresa 和她妹妹常被误认成双胞胎。然后再顺便补充一个用法是 confuse A with B， 这表示把 A 和 B 搞混，把 A 和 B 混为一谈。那这个片语着重在于混淆的意义，强调把不同的2个东西搞混了，以为是同一个。举例来说 Don't confuse money with happiness， 别把金钱和快乐混为一谈，金钱不等于快乐哦。好，那以上是今天重点整理，我们回顾今天单字吧。
Identical. The copy of the famous painting looked almost identical to the original. Extend. Mark's interest in movies extended even to early silent films. Genetic. Genetic testing was performed to confirm the identity of the victim. Recognition. Although they had met before, Bill showed no recognition of Tracy upon seeing her again. Characteristic. Wanda's great height was a characteristic she shared with her sisters. Application. Although it's a simple tool, a hammer has many practical applications. Potentially. If the dam fails, the entire valley could potentially be flooded.
Discussion starter starts now!
Here's our discussion starter for today. If you had a doppelganger, would you like to meet him or her? Why or why not?
I would like to meet my doppelganger because I would want to see somebody who looks like me. However, only if the doppelganger lives close to me. I would not want to travel halfway around the world just to see my doppelganger.
Well, I would not like to meet my doppelganger since meeting someone who looks like me might end up having a better personality than me, and they might actually have a bigger salary than me, so my wife or girlfriend might rather be with him than me. Well, everyone, today's article has come to an end, and I sure hope you enjoyed reading along with us. I am Roger.
I'm Helen.
See you next time.